I'm very late on this video as the hype for Kaitlin Bennett was over about a year ago, but I do think that there are many things that need to be said with regards to Kaitlin Bennett, and perhaps what is needed to be said the most is to criticize her from the right, or in other words, to provide a criticism not with regards to the most positions that she upholds, but a criticism on how she goes about it. Now, I don't have this massive story of watching her since 2015 as I had with Hunter Avalon, because I started to know about Kaitlin Bennett after some of the students in one of my tutorials started complaining about her, calling her the gun girl at around 2019, and naturally I was curious to what had triggered them so badly, and I immediately started watching some variation of Mark Dye's street interviews, which made herself often look like an idiot, unlike Mark Dice, who made the person he's interviewing looking like an idiot. And unfortunately, this sometimes is the defining feature of Kaitlin Bennett's street interrogations, as there are countless of leftist vloggers that got themselves famous off of Kaitlin Bennett's content. Now, I won't go into analyzing every single of her videos, and frankly most of her videos are possible anyways, yet still contain a certain element of cringe that I will precisely address today. This cringe is often defined by a few common characteristics in her videos, letting her opponents quote-unquote own themselves by letting them say something and then not challenging them.
Cool, communist radicals, just people who like think
that's
in
positive.
A different way. I mean, radical is like an inherently positive
communist thing. That's okay.
Yes.
Trying to do everything possible in order to not appear racist.
You called me a racist?
Yeah, I am.
What have I said that's racist? Why can't anybody who calls me racist give me proof?
And accuse leftists of being racist and bigoted towards minorities in an attempt to show hypocrisy.
You guys think so lowly of black people in this country that you think that they inherently do not have these resources. Why do you think black people are so below you?
Which at the end of the day doesn't seem that hypocritical given the context. Anyways, for the purpose of today's video, I will review one of the perceived self-owned videos by Kaitlin Bennett that every leftist had already reacted towards, and said how intelligent the people she had confronted had seemed, despite being total lunatics making baseless assertions, but because Kaitlin Bennett didn't challenge them enough and let them get away with saying a lot of things, as well as making cringe comments, this video was perceived as a self-own, and those Marxist students were perceived as smart and the US educational system as working. Now, the video started off by Kaitlin Bennett walking into two brainwashed, highly educated white Marxist students who started off by saying that they are in the oppressive class because they happen to be white. But unfortunately, she did not challenge them on the definition of what constitutes to be an oppressive class and for what reason they have decided to racialize people, and most importantly, why whites were the oppressive class. So the discussion has shifted towards the history of the campus, in which we learn that
most of it was built by slave labor.
Why are you here?
Many buildings have the names of slave-holding families.
Why do you go in them?
Now, instead of using this famous autopilot NPC conservative talking point of when you don't like something, why do you engage in it, misses some crucial point, considering that acquiring education is relatively important in terms of social mobility, just as engagement in public and cultural affairs, and as a conservative she should know better. But then the discussion shifted into whether we should be celebrating communists on campus, and of course the young Marxists say yes, but instead of Kaitlin Bennett perhaps making certain parallels with fascism and perhaps making a few arguments about how that disregards their previous talking points regarding white oppressive class, she went to this.
Neoliberalism has torn through humanity.
So individualism is out of the picture.
Basically letting him score more points and remain unchallenged. Then, after a few minutes, they began justifying communism to her, despite this black-haired woman claiming to be a democratic socialist later in the video.
That sit there and say, what are you?
I'm like a democratic socialist.
Which tells you a lot regarding what democratic socialism really means.
Let's talk about democratic socialism, not communism, Mr. Bloomberg. That's a cheap shot. Let's talk about democratic. Let's talk about what goes on in countries like Denmark, where Pete correctly pointed out they have a much higher quality of life in many respects than we do. What are we talking about? We are living in many ways in a socialist society right now.
Radical is like an inherently positive
Communist, that's okay.
Yes. The idea of communism is like absolutely liberating. It's the idea of like embracing a collective spirit to like build a better world. I mean, I'm like a democratic socialist.
To prove that she's a Marxist beyond any shadow of a doubt, she had basically made an assertion that we shouldn't have private property and that she's okay with not having one, and there is no such thing as a consensual agreement between an employee and an employer.
No, well, right now we're not living in a communist system, but I'm willing to give up. Personal property is a capitalistic notion that has been embedded in us, so we think that it's the right thing to do.
Consensual trade, I'm talking to her. Consensual trade is exploitation.
Consensual trade is not happening in capitalism. It's not a barter system.
Trade as far as everyone's on the same playing field.
Yeah.
Capitalism does not produce even outcomes for people.
Right.
That's the point. It shouldn't. It's trading.
And later even complaining that capitalism does not produce equalities of outcome for the people as if it's a good thing. And they just laughed it off like smug idiots that they are when Kaitlin Bennett rightfully said that equalities of outcome should not be strived for. As laughable as it may sound, so many people in the comments were saying that this black-haired woman is not a real communist, despite her literally advocating for communistic beliefs. The fact that she claims to be a democratic socialist is just a mask by which she lures people into her Marxist ideology. What it shows the most is people's gullibility to perceive people by their labels and not by their beliefs. Then the conversation went into the US having a racist system, presumably not against whites but against blacks, and Kaitlin Bennett had made the biggest cell phone yet.
We don't live in a society. I see different colors of people all around me every day.
As if not having a racist system presupposes you seeing people of different races every day. Frankly, so do Jews in Israel and whites in apartheid South Africa, and currently BIPOCs and white liberals saying that they see whites all around them, and especially in the positions of power, as an attempt to downplay hegemonic ideas that construct white racial identity and white people in general in a negative light. But before it gets better, it gets worse, and by the way, it never gets better, as Kaitlin Bennett had failed to properly deconstruct another argument made by a Marxist, and it was very shameful to watch.
Give me the evidence. How do we not live in a society?
So why are 13% of black people disenfranchised right now?
Because
because
13
black people deserve that?
I did not say that, no. I don't think anybody inherently deserves something based on the color of their
Explain to me
skin.
why 13% of black people are disenfranchised in this country.
He probably meant to say that blacks are about 13% of the population, yet at the same time he meant to say that all of them are disenfranchised, and at the end of the day he said what he said, which was very cringe, that is, presupposing that all blacks are inherently disenfranchised instead of trying to prove that. But what was even worse was Kaitlin Bennett's response. Instead of confronting this another BS claim, she had turned on her 1350 NPC script.
So 13% of the population is what makes up black people?
Millions of people are disenfranchised because of the systems.
Yeah, and it's not over yet. The Marxists had said something even more stupider than that, and I was cringing so hard at that moment, subsequently my face turning red for both of them. But he never stopped and said this.
Tell me the
This
system.
country is based on.
Tell me the system.
Mass incarceration, the prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex are all perpetuated on the notion that black and brown bodies are less than white bodies.
So that's in the law.
That is prescribed in the law, yes.
Can you show me where? What's the law?
And instead of questioning that properly, thereby asking for evidence, she asked whether that was prescribed in the law, as an attempt to self-own probably, and then he said yes. Instead of pushing on them harder and making them look like brainwashed idiots that they frankly are, Kaitlin had let them get away with not answering where it is said in the law, a habit that I'm sometimes also guilty of, letting my opponent get away away without being questioned hard enough. Anyways, the last part of the video that I will comment upon before it will turn extremely cringe and there will be just no comments is the black enslavement narrative that is honestly on my nerves, and I feel like Kaitlin simply had no knowledge to challenge it or is afraid of being called a racist if she was to bring up the HBD arguments such as race and IQ, in addition to the observation of blacks in other countries, and finally Thomas Sowell's arguments regarding the welfare state and the conditions of black family in the 1950s. But she's not aware of that, I'm afraid, and that's another issue that I want to talk about. She's not only unaware of good anti-leftist arguments, she's unaware that her cell phone technique often ends up backfiring because of a lack of certain knowledge and, most importantly, her constant strive towards showing how hypocritical the left is and, dare I say, the real racists.
So you guys are the ones saying black people based on their skin color can't do X, Y, and Z.
No.
Yes, you are.
The system did that to them. We're not saying they're inherently.
And then there's.
At the end of the day, she comes often with little prior knowledge, effectively making the leftist case for them, and it's not a rather good look, I'm afraid. Even though I respect her for being brave and standing up for what is right in most cases, I can't help myself but sometimes cringe at the way she does it, which consists of often bringing up bad optics to those who are on the right. Now, I don't even want to exaggerate, but sometimes it really does feel like I'm watching SJW's Got On 2015 style videos, but this time with Kaitlin Bennett in the main role. At the end of the day, those videos had given a lot of fuel to leftists, and especially the video which I just commented upon, despite those two Marxists being total lunatics. But when you see self-owns and their point being approved by other people, you suddenly forget about reasonableness, common sense, and resort to horde instincts, identifying who is perceived to be the winner and who looked like the dumb one. And yeah, those idiots really look like the winners here, and Kaitlin Bennett as the dumb one. Now, I could probably make a larger emphasis on her strange obsession with not being called a racist, tweets about Jews, confrontation style, and much more stuff. I decided to just go with what I have for the sake of making this video short and simplistic, but if you really want to, I can make a part 2 on Kaitlin Bennett, focusing on more points that I feel are worthy of discussion. But once again, I'll make it clear that I don't hate Kaitlin Bennett, just think that she can improve on a few things in order for her message to be more effective, and partially that consists of really understanding what you're arguing for. Are you here to own the libs or to promote the ideas of communities of strength? And I really hope that Kaitlin Bennett is not just to own the libs here, but in any event, this is pretty much the end for this video, and thank you for watching.